Hello and welcome to your astrology overview for September 2022. Here we are. It is coming into the seasons or the months that are going to bring in fall, and I am going to go through transit for transit, lunation for lunation, and even the equinox in this video. So you're going to get sort of day by day what the astrology is doing, and there will be a PowerPoint presentation to make it look a lot more absorbable. And this presentation, by the way, will also be available in a link in the description, as well as all previous presentations. I started using these last month, so you'll be able to get last month, and you'll have access to those every month to be able to download and use for your own personal reference. So I think that's pretty much the way it's going to go. You will be able to see the charts for each lunation. A lunation is actually a full moon or a new moon. And I will also put the chart up for Libra season, which in this case is actually the autumnal equinox. So we have a lot of exciting things to go through. Yes, there is a Mercury retrograde this month, and it's already affecting the way I speak. We will cover that, cover the details, let you know what that might look like, how you can decide where that might show up in your life, how visible or tangible it might be in your life, or if it's one of those retrogrades that you don't really feel. That does happen, and I'll explain that in this as well. Another thing of note is that Mars will be entering pre-shadow for his own retrograde, but don't worry, Mars does not go retrograde until like the end of October. So we still have time, but we're just going to mark that this is where the themes of that retrograde may begin to emerge in your life. So you know that anything that comes up and moves really quickly at this time is actually something you will have the opportunity to revisit and refine later. So what I'm going to do now is share my screen so that you can see everything that we are encountering this month. Here we go. All right, so looking at the screen now, we have the astrology overview for September 2022. So this is going to be your initial slide where you get to see the full moon in Pisces happening on the 10th. You can actually see here, I think this is my little pointer, that happens on the 10th. We have the full moon at 5:59 p.m. Eastern time. Feel free to adjust this for your time zone. Libra season, or the autumnal equinox, will be happening at 9:04 p.m. Eastern time on the 22nd. And then on the 25th, we wind down the month with a new moon in Libra at 5:54 p.m. Eastern time. Moving into the first week, the theme that I've decided is a great idea for this first week is taking deep breaths. So as that is beginning right now, and as you are watching this, you are likely in the first week, it's a great time to right now grab onto any grounding crystal. And this is not a bad omen. It's just a great way to start your month. We're going to take a deep inhale and exhale, because there's plenty to look forward to, as well as plenty of action to take place. Remember that challenging aspects can actually be the most visible, which gives us the most to work with, which can actually feel the most dynamic and even the most within our realm of influence, because we see them happening. So as we go through anything that is a mention of challenging aspects, I'm going to let you know how this might show up and make itself known to you through a challenge, and then what you can do to really embody that energy in the most positive or constructive way that might work for you. So we've taken our deep breaths, and now we can go into the first week of September, which really kicks off with Mars sextile retrograde Jupiter. Fun fact, when you see RX next to a planet in any kind of social media astrology or anywhere you go, the RX refers to that planet being retrograde. Jupiter is at this time still retrograde, and Mars is forming a sextile aspect from Gemini to Jupiter, which is in Aries, and going back towards Pisces right now. So Mars in an air sign of Gemini is really fanning the flames of Jupiter. And in fact, of course, Mars rules Aries, which is where Jupiter is. So we're really thinking about this relationship of Mars kind of turning back to Jupiter and saying, hey, I see what you're doing. I'm going to add some thought to this. I'm going to add some air to this. And I just want to check on my chart and make sure that I have this. Jupiter does in this situation sort of have the upper hand. So while this is the minor malefic with the greater benefic interaction, the minor malefic being Mars and the greater benefic being Jupiter, who is retrograde, so a little bit slow. If you've seen my skits on TikTok at The Real Crystalline, I kind of make Jupiter feel a little motion sick because he is so big. He is a gas giant, so moving backwards might give some motion sickness. But it's just a fun way of portraying that this planet is not moving in the original direction of intention. So we are revisiting Jupiterian themes right now as well. And we have been for a while at this point, several weeks to a month. The date's escaping me officially, but it was when the sun was around in Leo. So last month sometime. So what we're seeing is Jupiter with a bit of an upper hand, even though he's feeling kind of queasy, and Mars really adding a burst to what Jupiter is up to. So again, fanning Jupiter's flames. And Jupiter giving us this burst of courage and gusto to accomplish the intellectual goals, thinking about Mars and Gemini, and the big brain work. So Jupiter makes things expansive, makes things a little bit bigger. Jupiter's huge, right? So if we think about the big brain work with Mars being in Gemini and Jupiter adding some expansion to that, this is a great idea for brainstorming. This is a great time for thinking about things that have been giving you trouble, and then having a broad scope to be able to come up with multiple solutions that really break through what's going on. So I have written here admin work with enthusiasm. If you have some tedious things, you might actually have that energy and that focus to be able to accomplish those at this time. A sextile is a fortunate aspect. It's a smaller like opportunity. We have a little bit of energy. We're going to get this going. This is nice. And it's something that you can still consciously use. Trines are awesome because they offer sort of a blessing or a talent. And the only downside that you can really think of is they're so easy. Sometimes you miss them happening. So sextiles are great because they show up a little bit, and it's like the handshake opportunity to be able to do something. So this is one that you can say, I intend to do this today, and it will be able to work out. On the 2nd of September, we have Mercury opposing retrograde Jupiter. So Jupiter getting interaction again from Mercury, who is now in Libra at this point. And so Libra being relationships, your ideals, those things that really have value to you in an air sense, right? So we're thinking in your ideals, in your values, those kinds of things, not as tangible as they would be in Venus's other sign of Taurus. So Mercury, communication, thought, thinking, connection, those themes are in a Libran style or aesthetic right now, and they are opposing Jupiter. So we're getting this reflection from Jupiter of like what's really big and what maybe we've made big, and now we can see that there's this breakthrough in fair and open communication, creating clarity rather than creating a blow up argument. So oppositions are tense aspects. This is one where you may notice it because it shows up through a challenge or through a situation in your life. And when you see that happen, you can navigate that with grace and ease, which is another Venusian way to do things, by really saying, how can we communicate this? What do you need? What do I need? Where's that meeting in the middle? One of the things I like to remind people that I was reminded of myself is that Libra, the scales, isn't the dishes of the scales. It is that piece in the middle that creates the balance. So in this, you can find this mediation and compromise by knowing clearly what goes in each scale and how to create the balance between those things. So there may be some truths emerging and convictions made simply because Jupiter is in Aries. So there's some discerning things happening here. And the truth is something that is very Mercury Libra as well. We're seeking that truth. We're trying to find out what's at the source and at the core of this situation, and how can we take that and create something with it that is going to lead us in an expansive direction, initiate something in that Aryan way to move us forward. And then 2 days later, on the 4th, Mars will enter that range of degrees that he will be retracing come October 30th when Mars does station retrograde. So between now and October 30th, with Mars in Gemini, wherever Gemini is in your chart, you've got Mars, and you've had Mars there for about a week or two now. So you might have noticed, especially if you're someone born during the day, and especially if Gemini is in one of the 4 points on your chart. So that would be the 9 o'clock, which was kind of your ascendant of the chart. That's your personal life. The noon point of your chart, the 12 o'clock, which is sort of a career or life's work area. The 3 o'clock point of your chart, which is other people. So other other people may have been having situations come up and you've been interacting or affected by those. And then the 6 o'clock point of your chart, which is actually your 4th house. And that would be your home life or the way that you're taking care of yourself and finding rest. So be aware, especially if those are the areas where Gemini shows up for you. You're probably going to notice this more tangibly. You're going to see this show up in your life. If it's in any other house, the themes will still remain, but it may not be very much very apparent in your daily life. It may not show up in pivotal events. It may be something that's going on in the more subtle areas. So check where Gemini is in your chart and just know that starting now through the end of October, whatever's coming up in that area of your life, you will have the ability to revisit this. You will actually be able to say, oh, that's right, that happened pretty quickly because Mars in air, there's nothing stopping this happening. And Mars is very progress oriented. It's the fire through the air. So thinking of Mars like a meteor right now, making a lot of progress, maybe moving a little bit too quickly with things, even though Mars himself is slowing down to prepare for this retrograde phase now. Things are going to start showing up that will get an opportunity to be revisited during retrograde and then solidified once Mars actually traces over these degrees again. So how it works is we'll imagine that this is Mars, and we're going to do this again with Mercury this month as well. So thinking about this being Mars, Mars is moving through the sky. I'm going to go this way because I think that's the right way for you. Mars is moving through the sky, and then when it's retrograde, it appears from our vantage point to move backwards. So the ground that it covered up to here, it's going to go backwards again, but then it's going to station direct. So it will cover those again for a 3rd time. That's why the pre-shadow is the first time it goes over the degrees, then it retrogrades over those degrees. And the post-shadow of a retrograde period is just that final time that it covers those degrees in a situation. So I hope that's helpful in really imagining what a retrograde is and empowers you to feel more in control of the situation and more able to flow with the situation. Sometimes it's not about control, it's about releasing control and being able to see what is coming up around you and how you can adapt, adjust, and really sink into what the universe is bringing up around you and is offering you through this situation. So good things to keep in mind, especially between the 4th of September and the 30th and moving all the way into January, because that's how long Mars will retrograde. On the 5th, we have Venus coming into Virgo. So Venus entering Virgo, Venus again is the planet of relationships, the planet of values, the planet of beauty and aesthetic, and those things that really make us feel indulgent, and really where we place our worth, where we place value in things. So what we're seeing here is Venus coming into Virgo, which is a place of organizing, a place of efficiency. Think about wheat being cultivated and farmed and those things being created and the processes that go into nurturing our physical selves and the work that goes into making that possible. So we're coming into our daily work routines, we're coming into our health, and we're saying, how do I want to feel? What feels good to me? What kind of routine in the day do I prefer to have to feel the most like myself and to feel the most comfortable with who I am? So this might also be happening through relationships that we have with other people. What kind of people do I want in my life in order for me to feel supported and like I can still achieve my goals and the things that I want to do? Who helps me with that? Who do I help? And Virgo also, because it is such a locomotive sign in this way, there may be some anxiety that comes up in relationships, a hyperfixation on control in relationships. So this is good to be aware of and just say, I understand that I'm in Virgo right now. I'm going to focus on efficiency and the highest expression of health and the benefits of that rather than the fixation of the little details. Little details will be noticeable to you. And so you will be able to say, I didn't miss it, so I don't have to worry. You will be able to say, what is the best way for this relationship, for this situation, for my budget to express itself so that I know this is organized, this is supportive, I'm ready to move forward. So we're working together to achieve service and goals, to educate, all of those things that you would want to do with a more intellectual Venus, thinking about the librarian kind of Venus with this. And that takes us into, if I can get my screen to work over here. There we go. We come into the next week of September, which is the 9th through the 15th. I've dubbed this Revisiting Relationships. And there is a reason for this. And it's the very first thing we're going to talk about. Mercury does station retrograde on September 9th. So on September 9th, I know you guys have probably been hearing about this a lot already, and you will hear about it. So I hope if this is the first place you're hearing about it, it's a great foundation to help you feel, again, solid and totally fine about what's coming up. Now we're going to use our little tools again to show you what retrograde means in Mercury's sense. So let's imagine that my lovely crystal here is the sun, and this is Mercury. Mercury goes around the sun, and at some point it conjoins the sun. Closer to us, you are Earth in this case, closer to us, and then sometimes further from us because it goes around in a circle. So if you're Earth, this is what it looks like. And you can see how when Mercury is doing this, it's going one direction, and when Mercury is back here, it appears to be going another direction. That's retrograde. That's how that works. So really, it is just our observation and our perspective of that astronomical event. And at this point, Mercury is beginning to make its way closer to us. So retrograde is something that we interpret as being a more internal process because Mercury is closer to us at this point. So Mercury in Libra is going to retrograde through October 2nd. I'm going to move my little face here. It's going to move through retrograde through Libra and then finish its retrograde on October 2nd. During the retrograde, it will move back into Virgo on September 24th, which is listed here for your convenience. So the pre-shadow of that, the first time Mercury covered the degrees that it's about to recover, began September 24th. Began August 21st. So from August 21st until this day of September 9th, you may have noticed some stuff coming up in your life, especially in the areas of Virgo in your chart, and then also Libra in your chart. As these things have been happening, you might have seen things come up and it's new and it's something you didn't quite get to put a pin in, but that's okay because this is the opportunity to put the pin in it. That's what Mercury retrograde allows us to do. If you're imagining writing a story, you write the draft, then you edit the draft, then you read it again and make sure it's what you want. So you have these revisions that you're able to make before being able to share something you're proud of with other people. Think about Mercury retrograde, especially since Mercury is kind of the writing and communication planet, as your opportunity to edit what has occurred specifically and possibly especially since August 21st. Again, it will go back into Virgo on the 24th. It will finish its retrograde on October 2nd and then make one final pass, those final revisions, until October 16th. So the themes of these things are going to be Libran initially, and then they're going to come back into the Virgoan themes. So we have Libra, again, relationships, justice, ideals. Where do you place your ideals? How do you decide what's fair? What does that mean for you? And maybe where in your life have you been over-compromising? So you need to reevaluate what your boundaries are to be able to establish these really healthy relationships, balanced relationships, and fair relationships that are unconditionally loving. Because if there's conditions, then the scales are tipped, right? So then we consider crossing the T's and dotting the I's when things move back into Virgo. Now that I have a sense of what this looks like for me, how do I express that in my daily routines? How does what I do in my health, my work, and just the tasks that I accomplish each day actually reflect and embody what I believe on the inside, so that you do have that balance between your mind and the physical world and your spirit and your physical experience. So those are things to keep an eye on. Again, you want to check out primarily Libra in your chart to be able to see where this is going to be affecting you. And then after September 24th, check out where where Virgo is in your chart. And then you'll be able to say, we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's now. Here's the area of my life where these things may be coming up. It's that simple and it is that intuitive, and it's probably something you will do naturally. So even if you don't take this into account and you're not saying, oh, it's the 9th, Mercury is in retrograde, I have to focus on this, you don't have to. It's going to happen naturally. My hope is that this is validation for your experience and empowers you that you are actually in perfect alignment with your own timing naturally without really needing to focus too much on other things. So then on the 10th, we move into, hi buddy, my corgi is with me and he's adorable. Okay, so on the 10th, we do have a full moon in Pisces, which I will show on the next slide so you can see the chart. But thinking about this full moon in Pisces, we're looking at doing the deep work in our relationships with this one. And so again, we're focusing on the beliefs and organizing our thoughts, because if the full moon is in Pisces, then the sun, of course, is in Virgo, because a moon being full is actually opposing the sun. So if the moon is here in Pisces, the sun is on the opposite side, which would be Virgo. So we're looking at the balance between these two things, how we can create tangible practices, like I just mentioned, that support and embody our actual beliefs. So living in alignment with your ideals, living in alignment with your philosophy, kind of walking your talk or walking your faith in your belief systems. So this is a perfect opportunity to be able to acknowledge what that is for you and what that feels like for you, and then to be able to decide how that looks in your everyday life. On the 11th, we will have the sun in trine with a retrograde Uranus. And so Uranus is retrograde, again, doing the same thing of repeating things. Uranus is very slow. So this has been going on for a while. And it does appear that Uranus has the upper hand in this. So there are certain surprises coming that will help us be able to identify, see, shine light on changes and surprises for the highest good. Now, I say surprises rather than accidents, which you might sometimes hear with Uranus. The reason I say this is because, again, it is one of those trine aspects. So that trine aspect is an easy aspect. It's a smooth aspect. Think about the trine being the side of a triangle and water just flowing down it. It doesn't have to think about it. It's not getting blocked by anything. It just goes. It slips on down. So we may have certain surprises that hopefully are more pleasant surprises that come up and really help you align with your highest good, align with your health. You might have a surprise come up or just have a sudden new interest in something that says, oh, I finally feel like I want to and am ready to commit myself to this lifestyle that I've been looking forward to and that I've researched properly and am making sure is actually in my highest benefit. So this is a great time to be thinking about, if you want to do a 180, where do you want to do it? What kind of new thing do you want to start? And you'll notice the ability and the resources to do that will show up, kind of like a eureka moment or an opening surprise gift for you around this time. Again, you're going to want to check where this is happening with the sun in Virgo and Uranus in Taurus. So Uranus has been in Taurus for a good long time. Things in that area of your life on your chart have been changing. Now the sun activates a trine there from wherever Virgo is in your chart. So you can kind of get a deeper look into that if you want to. Now we can look at the chart for this full moon that we mentioned. And the affirmation that I give for this full moon is really great to me because it blends the tangible with the ideal or the imagined. This is, I know why I am. And I love this because during a full moon, you can just sit and let yourself fill up with knowing why you are. It will be super helpful. And the way I did this chart, you're going to notice I did moon on the 1st. So none of these houses really have too much meaning for your area personally. It's just everything in respect to the moon. That's something to keep in mind as well. And it looks a little bit different to me, but that's okay. So we have the moon on the 1st. And so this is a great idea of, I know why I am. How do you discover why you are? Interview yourself about the feelings that you have throughout the day. If you have a thought about something, you can say, oh, wow, I'm conscious of that thought. I'm witnessing this feeling and this thought, which those two are connected. So a feeling will lead to a thought. The way you feel about something kind of tells you what you're going to decide about it, which is your thoughts. So interview yourself about your feelings. that you have throughout the day and see which belief they're coming from. That thought is likely your belief statement. This is something. It's an imperative statement. It feels definitive, and very often it feels like something even a child would say. It goes all the way back to just something very simplistic. And then you can ask yourself why you believe that. And if you don't know why you believe it, this is an opportunity to explore why you do believe it so you can actually firmly believe it and be able to support yourself with it so you're not standing on a wobbly surface. Or if you can't find a good reason to believe it, maybe reframe it and allow yourself to know why you believe differently. And that can radically change your outlook, change your life, change the way that you do things. Sometimes we believe things and it's like, this belief happened because I was doing something else. I stopped doing this something else, but I kept this and it doesn't exist anymore. It reminds me of the story of a certain recipe that a family had passed down from generation to generation. And they kept asking, why did great-great-grandma do this? Why did grandma do this? Well, it was always because that's how the previous parent did it, but nobody really knew what the function was of that or what the need was of that. And it was because that day the grandmother didn't have a certain ingredient, so substituted it. And there was just that. It wasn't anything secret. It wasn't anything special. It was just simply, oh, that was the circumstances of that day. And I never changed the routine afterwards. So if it's time for you to change your routine because circumstances have changed, you'll be able to know why that is. And you'll be able to have really great clarity on how to do that. This is also a perfect day for daydreaming. The moon is full in Pisces. Let yourself expand your horizons and dream far and astral project if that's something that you do. But thinking about really deep meditation, being able to reframe thoughts that help to create your reality is a helpful thing to keep in mind. So knowing why you are is that philosophical way of exploring this. And then we get to move into, moving backwards. There we go. So 9/16 through 9/22, you got a little preview of the autumnal equinox there. Coming up to 9/16, we're looking at Venus forming a square with Mars, and at the same time, Mars is conjunct the moon. So the moon is in Gemini at this point, and the sun, which is in Virgo, will still be opposing Neptune in Pisces. Remember, the moon was just in Pisces creating the full moon, which means that if Neptune is in Pisces, the sun is now still opposing Neptune. So that's how that goes. And I'll actually show that really quickly here. Let's go back. So you can see the sun is here and Neptune is right here at 24. So the sun was actually opposing the moon. And then a couple days later, the sun's going to keep trucking along and it will oppose Neptune because the moon is on Neptune at this point. So 9/16, a few days later, we do see that this happens. So this brings us to about the halfway point of Neptune's retrograde phase. That's another fun fact. For the outer planets, it's different for the inner planets, namely for Mercury and Venus. But for the outer planets, when a planet is in trine with the sun, it is likely about to station retrograde or direct. When it is opposing the sun, it's about halfway through its retrograde phase. So with the sun opposite Neptune, we are halfway through Neptune's retrograde phase. And at the same time, Venus is forming this square with Mars, who happens to be next to the moon. And I'm going to make sure I pull up my notes to give you the best information I can on this. There we go. So Mars in this square with Venus does have the upper hand a little bit. So we're applying some again, that intellectual fire, which I kind of like, but again, it's not angular for me in my chart. So apologies to anybody who's feeling Mars and Gemini a little bit harder. I just came from a period of time where that pressure has been relieved. So a lot of us are having different experiences, which is another cool thing about astrology. So we have Venus in this inferior square with Mars conjunct the moon. And this is creating maybe some frustrations with interruptions in your tasks. Remember, Venus is in Virgo, really nose to the grindstone, detail oriented, probably a little bit too zoomed in. And then Mars comes in and is like, hey, I had a thought. Hey, I had a thought. Hey, you missed something. Hey, what about this? Hey, can you do this for me? So it's those notifications when you're trying to work on a project and somebody keeps pinging you. And that might be a really great way to express the way Mars is kind of pinging Venus, who is trying to focus on something. in your life, this may look like a possibility, especially with the sun opposing Neptune at the same time, for emotional overwhelm or for overworking and not really knowing where your boundaries are on your energy, because the sun, which really gives our energy, is the light giver, right, is opposing Neptune, who blurs boundaries. So at this point, we may have accidentally overworked ourselves. So this conflict between Venus and Mars may actually, through possibly not such a great notification, will let us know, hey, I need to take my time with something. I need to take a break. And so a good thing can come from it, especially if you're aware. But it's really helpful to remember that there may be some conflicts in relationships with others, remembering that Venus does really help us interact with other people. And it may be a time where we are a little bit on our last straw a bit, because of emotional overwhelm, overworking. Usually when something comes up where there's an argument or there's contention, it's because somebody is out of their feeling of safety, right? So if we've overworked, and if that person has also overworked, then there is this potential for conflict, which is going to be brought about through this square so that we can acknowledge it and repair it, or create a win-win situation and then move forward and remember what our boundaries are. So setting boundaries is, this is what I need, this is what you need, and that's okay. Another thing I love about Neptune is it really does, at least in Pisces really does express that ability for unconditional love, because it just doesn't have these structures to it. So you create this ability to say, I see all of you, and that's cool with me. And so if we can do that and then say, can you see all of me and be cool with it? I see all of me and I'm cool with it. At the same time, we create this ability to bring a sense of peace to this conflict. So that's something to keep in mind. This is also kind of a plot point in the cycles between, obviously, the sun and Neptune, in the halfway point of Neptune's retrograde and the halfway point of Neptune's cycle with the sun from conjunction to conjunction. But it's also a plot point with Venus and Mars. They had their conjunction back in February through March of 2022. And at that time, there was, of course, a lot of anticipating of, is Russia going to invade Ukraine? There was some group protests going on at the time. So we have this Mars Venus coming together saying, hey, war and peace. And what happened from that is, this is my favorite that I think really embodies what's going on. There was a headline around that time that says, quote, "My husband and I don't speak the same love language." So if you think about that headline, and how that really embodies the energies of contention between Mars and Venus, who are the in Fortuna minor and Fortuna minor, Venus being the minor benefic and Mars being the minor malefic, or the nighttime benefic and malefic. Those two coming together really do make a war, Mars, aggression, sports, all of those things, ambition, and Venus being peace, love, all of those aesthetic things, values. They come together, they clash. Now we're having this situation where they're having a bit of a conflict to be able to renegotiate some things as they move through their cycle together. So at this point, because we know that there were some relevant headlines at the time, you may notice some headlines reflecting this as well. On the 18th of September, so that's 2 days later, we do have Mercury retrograde opposing Jupiter retrograde. So now both planets are retrograde. And on the same day, the sun is going to trine Pluto retrograde. Now, remember what I said about trines? This is a time where Pluto is now preparing to move direct. Pluto has been retrograde for quite a while. It's still going to take some time. I have noted here that Pluto actually stations direct on October 8th. Pluto is way out there, so it is going to take its time doing that, which is just Pluto's way, and that's wonderful. So a lot of this is a replay of what happened on September 2nd that we talked about, because this is Mercury, which did oppose Jupiter, which we talked about at the beginning of this video. It's going to revisit that. So this is our first encounter of something that we experienced during the pre-shadow being activated to be revisited again. So remember what happened on the 2nd, and then think, okay, so these themes may be coming up again. Again, that same person may come back to you and follow up. or you may follow up with someone. And so we have this ability with the addition of the Sun trine Pluto in this situation, where that contention happened between Mercury and Jupiter, where the conversations may be in tension right now. There's this like, I'm not really sure what the solution here is. I have my way, you have your way. We're at opposite sides of this. There might be an easier way to sever one approach and begin another, because Pluto comes in with this trine with the Sun to make this easy slicing motion to say, you know what, maybe we just take a whole new direction. And that works as well. Pluto, of course, is the planet of transformation. And with it still being retrograde, it might be just a transformation of the way you think, a transformation of the way you see something, and just deciding to go in a different direction that's going to take things to a higher level, that's going to make things workable, and just say, yeah, this doesn't work, bundle that up, throw it away. It's retrograde anyway. Let's do something new. Let's try a second way of doing it. We've learned, so it's not lost, it's not wasted. Now we get to build upon that. So that is my favorite way of thinking about the way the 18th may express itself. Then we come to the 20th, where Venus will trine Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, Venus rules Taurus. If you've been watching my skits, I like to display Venus as being a little irritated with the way that Taurus is wrecking, with the way that Uranus is wrecking Taurus. But we have on this day a trine where Venus gets to receive this trine from Uranus. So Uranus saying, hey, surprise, I might be changing a lot of things in your space, but here's the good news about it. So there could be potential for breakthroughs in any practical problems or processes. Again, Venus is receiving this sort of spark of inspiration, this idea of how to do something differently. It's a eureka moment. So if you're stuck in the tedium of a problem, this might actually break you away from it, and you might have this new opportunity and possibility to be able to move forward with things. Also, rational conversations that offer radical solutions, thinking about Venus and how she likes to engage with other people, getting outside of your head today, if you're feeling really stuck in something, may be a way to really access that trine energy, to have that outside perspective that shifts the way you see things, which is really cool, because that's kind of how miracles happen. It's that change in perspective, which is something that I learned from the Course in Miracles. All right. And then we get to our next situation of the month, which is the equinox. This brings in fall. This brings in Libra season. And it is the time where the daylight and the nighttime are at an equal phase between each other. So this is really kind of a beautiful thing. I know a lot of us are fall people. We just really like that time of year, the warm and cozy, the fuzzy. That's the Venusian time of Libra, really stepping in and saying, hey, this is where I feel like I am okay, like I have everything balanced, and I can find balance within myself. I can go out and get, the coffee flavors that I'm excited about, or all of these fall things that bring comfort and warmth into my life. And we also begin to initiate that holiday season where we have things to begin looking forward to and little milestones to help us through. So this is a really lovely time of year. And of course it is, because we have Libra helping us to establish balance naturally and bring that into our lives. So my theme for Libra season is I am me and they are they, and it's beautiful. And that is derived from a Boy Meets World quote for my other millennials out there. This season is a lot about setting your own boundaries in relationships to really establish connections without conditions, that unconditional love that I've been mentioning. So you're accepting others perfectly for who they are. I expect this person only ever to be who they are. I expect nothing more and nothing less of them, but for them to be themselves in whatever way that is. And I also expect me to be fully who I am. And that may or may not be compatible with who they are. And that's still beautiful. We get to do our things, and we get to interact with the people in our lives that are compatible with us. And we get to find the people and have them find us that fit with us. And this does happen. Trust me, I was the one in high school who sat alone at the table, but it does happen where when you align with who you are, you naturally gravitate towards the people who are compatible with you because you have similar interests, and you start leaning into those interests, and then you find people who share those interests. It's very magical, but at the same time, I can give you that tangible, this is why that happens. It's because you start letting yourself express yourself. And when you do that, you place yourself around more of what you are. And when you place yourself around more of what you are, you find people who are also partly that thing. And then you get to make your friends that way. So Venus, that connection, the friendships, you're finding people who actually fit and are compatible with you throughout this time. And you know what? Sometimes you're finding you. And that's totally great. That's actually a great, perfect place to start, and a really great thing to revisit every year around Libra season. Where am I at? How am I supported by my friend circles? How am I supported by the people I spend the most of my time with? You know, if you are an average of the people you spend the most of your time with, how's that going? How do you feel about that? And is there a way that you might be able to branch out or recommit to things like that? Venus and Libra, especially, thinking about those commitments in partnerships is something that you want to really think about. And with Mercury being retrograde at this time, you can even see here on the chart, Mercury is conjunct the sun. So we're at that inferior conjunction where Mercury is perfectly between the Earth and the sun, and they're right there. So this is a great time for checking in with yourself on your relationships, checking in with yourself on relationships with others and yourself, to be able to see what is going on and where you're at and what you want, and really establish that. So the sun in Libra is opposite Jupiter at this point as well, which is awesome because you have the sun here and Jupiter is over here, which means Jupiter is getting about halfway through his retrograde as well. And so we have this two halfway points, because for the outer planets, like I mentioned, the opposition is their halfway point. But for the inner planets, like Mercury, the conjunction is their halfway point. So Jupiter and Mercury are both around their halfway points of their retrogrades at this time. Jupiter is going to take longer to get finished with his, but Mercury, as we mentioned, will wrap this up in about 10 days from September 22nd. So this event of Libra season is actually ruled by Venus, who's in Virgo. So we have this other thing that I really want to share with you. Mercury is in Libra. Venus is in Virgo. Venus rules Libra and Mercury rules Virgo. That is called mutual reception. So in traditional astrology, we would say that Mercury and Venus, since they're right next door, they can't see each other, so they can't really interact too much. But with this, it's like they have a group chat. They're texting each other and they're still in communication and they're still supporting each other. So that is some really nice support for them to be able to have. And let me see here, just checking a couple other minute details. So we have this mutual reception between Mercury and Venus as the sun enters Libra. It's kind of pretty. And of course it is, right? So let's see, Venus is still in trine with Uranus at this point, opposite Neptune. So Venus has reached that point here. She's at 22, Neptune's at 23. So again, with being a little bit idyllic, having those rose-colored glasses, and still bringing radical changes that align, take from our ideals and say, okay, this is what I want. This is the world I want to see. Here are the steps that I can bring into creation right now. Here's a change I can make that's going to make my life just a little bit more the way that I want it to be. So again, setting boundaries in relationships to establish connections without conditions, and accepting others perfectly for who they are, deciding if that's compatible with who we are. I am me, they are they, and it's beautiful. So that is a little preview of Libra season. And then we can move into the next phase, the 23rd through the 29th, which I have dubbed forming of new bonds. This, as you can tell, is quite a busy time in the month. I think this is our fullest slide that we have. So we begin on the 23rd, the very next day, with Mercury perfecting that conjunction, which we saw, where they're both at 0 degrees, but they were a couple minutes different. So this is the point where Mercury will conjoin the sun and then ingress into Virgo. So tip back into Virgo to join Venus there. So we're halfway through Mercury's retrograde, back into Mercury's domicile and exaltation, this is where you want to start checking where's Virgo in my chart, because now Mercury is back here in retrograde. Things that happened here before may come back up again. Nothing to panic about. You are someone who is empowered. You're walking in alignment. You've got this foreknowledge. So you've been able to kind of prepare. You can catch whatever is being tossed your way, and you're good. You're good to go. I have full confidence in you. And I know that you're going to do great. Also, at this point, it's worth noting the moon comes into Virgo. So we have Mercury, Venus, and the moon all in Virgo, bringing a lot of emphasis into that as the moon is approaching at this point that conjunction with the sun in Libra, which will be the new moon that we experience by the end of this week. It'll be on the 25th. So on the 24th, however, we do still get an interaction where Venus perfects that opposition with Neptune that we saw coming up in the Libra chart. So not everything is as ideal as it seems. We're looking at opposition here. So it's this situation of one person's over here, another person's over here. The good news about this is you get a really great bird's eye view of the situation, but also it's a bit of distance happening between those people. So it's almost a tug of war between this is one way and this is another. And if you can find that kind of nice tension that supports itself, you can actually create something with it. So we might be noticing some areas in our lives that we've been a little bit idyllic or idealistic about that could be a little bit more practical, that we could bring some more practicality to, we can be more engaged with. This might also be a time of realizing that certain relationships aren't functioning as well. Mercury just retrograded back here out of Libra. We may have been noticing this theme coming up for a little while. And so this is a great opportunity for allowing relationships to do what they're going to do. If that is separating, that's okay. A term that I like to use for this that really helps when it feels like a relationship is ending, but you can kind of tell it's for the better, is to just let that person go their own way, merry meet, merry part, merry meet again, which is, it was great that our paths intersected. Now our paths are diverging, but we're going to go off. We're going to discover more about ourselves, and maybe those paths will come back together again. And if they don't, that is also fine. So it's a really great just detachment technique for a situation where a relationship seems to be growing in different directions. Then on the 25th, we do have our new moon in Libra. We will go over that chart on the next slide. This is going to be a new moon about getting to know each other better. New moon in Libra, beginning a new understanding of things, coming to new understandings by separating ourselves from situations and people and coming up with rational compromises. So again, this is the very next day. So we still have this Venus opposite Neptune. We still have Mercury retrograde in Virgo. The sun now is in Libra. So thinking about that, we will go into it with more depth with an affirmation and all of that on the next slide. Then on the 26th, we will have Venus trining Pluto. So this is something that has happened before. This is her second trine with Pluto. So if you think about when they conjoined, Venus went around, she trined, now she's trining again, and she's going to come back around to finish that cycle. So we're at this second trine with Pluto. And this is an opportunity. It's something that is still part of the new moon. It was there when we had this new moon. So you'll probably notice it most around the new moon because the moon's really translating that to us in a personal way. The same thing with what happens on the 27th when Mercury also trines Pluto, because remember, Mercury and Venus are kind of running alongside each other at this point. So thinking about these two, we're looking at Mercury kind of conjunct Venus and Virgo. They're both trining Pluto. So this creates a fairness with practicality, mediation, and compromise to really transform relationships. This is a trine with Pluto. So we're taking our relationships to the next level. And the best way to do that is, of course, to communicate, to understand in a new way. So there's separation from the issue, being able to say, if we're going through a hard time, and this is a technique that I've seen work really well. If you need to have a conversation, promise the other person that you will witness what they have to say, and that there will be, that you won't get mad, that you've prepared yourself to receive the information and you've prepared yourself to have a conversation about it. And that way you guys can find common ground, and the The emotional aspect, of course, will still be there, but you can have this conversation, which brings transformation into that relationship. So there's going to be a new level of depth and intimacy and intensity in the relationship when you understand this. And it is a trine. I think it's going to happen pretty naturally. So we're weeding through the relationship garden and making it more beautiful and giving it more space to thrive with this energy. Then we come up to the 28th when Mars trines Saturn, also retrograde. You can tell we have a lot of retrograde. There's a lot of stuff going on internally at this point. So Mars trine Saturn gives us this burst of inspiration. And in fact, Saturn has the upper hand here. So with Mars trine Saturn, Mars is the one doing the moving. So it's applying to Saturn, but Saturn in the sky is actually higher up. So we have a burst of ambition in things that we've been restructuring. You may notice that it's like, I have a lot of energy. I need to do something with it. I'm going to redecorate my room, or I'm going to organize my closet, or I'm going to purge my closet and get ready for some fall clothing. Just something that allows us to restructure or to remove, maybe restrict things where they need to be, where it's beneficial for them to be. And by restriction, I do mean like the purging of the closet. Don't unhealthily restrict yourself. Just a nice caveat and disclaimer there. We will have the possibility of intellectual ideas and heated connections, heated as in ambitious. These are two malefics. They are in trine with each other, but they're still the crankier energies of the sky. So Mars being really ambitious, Saturn wanting restriction, enjoying solitude, taking the higher perspective right now, and being retrograde. We're seeing this happen with Saturn kind of wanting to rein in some of the energy and hone it. So Mars has the energy, Saturn is providing structure and focus to the energy to apply it to something. And that may just be being very decisive with something and saying, this is the right choice. So that's a great way of thinking about how you can really work on muscle testing today. I have videos about that on TikTok that really explain what muscle testing is and how you can use it for yourself. Thinking about just your gut instincts. This feels like the right decision. I'm decisive about this. I'm going to go with it. And it may feel a little bit more of like an impulsive decision, but we have Saturn trine here. So we are saying this is something that I feel good about it now. I'm pretty sure I'm going to feel good about it later as well. So that's one way you can think about using this energy. Then on the 29th, guys, we're almost to the end of the month. On the 29th, we have Venus ingressing into her domicile of Libra to round out this month with Venus approaching the sun. It's a time of honoring our boundaries and fairness. Remember, Libra loves compromise. Libra loves fairness. In creating that, sometimes, and people with prominent Libras might know this already, we have a tendency to over-compromise. We have a tendency to sacrifice in order to create fairness for other people. So it's helpful to remember that a win-win is a win for everybody, and it can be found, it can be established. This is also a really great time for poetry, for thinking beautiful thoughts. Libra is Venusian, but it's also an air sign. So you have this ideal, you have that. This is why Libra does ideals and justice and things like that. It's that higher level of the intellectual beauty. So thinking about those kinds of things and how they are even more emphasized throughout this Libra season now that Venus is coming into conjunction with the sun, which will happen officially by degree in the next month of October. So on our next slide, we will be able to see our Libra new moon, which we mentioned. This happens on the 25th. Again, I have the new moon just on the ascendant here. So this is just the chart in relation to the new moon. Looking at this, we have the moon conjunct the sun. That's what a new moon is. That's why you don't see the moon, because it's actually blocked out by how bright the sun is. It's not behind the sun. It's just blocked out by how bright the sun is. And so what we've got going on with this new moon is thinking about the moon in Libra, the sun in Libra. They are opposing Jupiter, who's, like we had mentioned, halfway through his retrograde. So this is an internal expansion with each other, with our relationships. It's just coming to know each other even better. It's beginning this cycle of really a cycle that could last a year, but you'll get a really good understanding of this in probably 6 months. And even in the next 2 weeks, you'll be able to see this growth happening in your relationships, which is lovely and beautiful. Venus, the ruler of Libra, is conjunct Mercury at this point. So we have Libra here, but Venus is over here with Mercury. So creating that opportunity, especially with this trine still in effect between these two and Pluto, we're understanding how we can take those conversations to the next level, create the fairness, practicality, mediation, and compromise in our relationships by separating from the issue enough to be able to say, oh, look at that. Now I have the higher perspective. I can see what's fair. I can see what I need. I can see what you need, and we can come together. The affirmation, of course, is I'm a magnet for the right compatible people. And I just recommend going deep, have the deep conversations with other people or with your journal at this point, and just go deep in understanding yourself. Because when you understand yourself, you know what's a win for you. And then you have the security and the safety to explore someone else and help them. Your cup is filled and it even overflows to be able to help someone else. You can't offer something from yourself from an empty cup. So this is another Libra season reminder of make sure your cup is filled enough that it's overflowing in order to fill another person's cup. And with that, we do round out our conversation about September. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. I love interacting with you guys. I'm glad that you guys find this helpful. Again, you can actually get this slideshow for your ability to download on my website. There will be a link in the description right down there. And we can stay connected on Instagram and TikTok at The Real Crystalline. There are fakes out there. I will never DM you for a reading or anything like that, but I do offer them on my website. That's the only place that you can really go to schedule them at your leisure, in your control, when you are ready. Also, check us out on the Alchemist Inkwell podcast. Emily and I are there all the time. We love being able to interact with you in that way as well. I hope you have a lovely September and a glorious and comfortable Libra season as we come into fall. So thank you guys so much. I will see you next month. I can't wait to see how this month expresses for you. Have a great time. Bye.